Hi everyone. Tonight we walk the halls of a medieval castle. The air is old and cold here. Every breath turns to mist before your eyes. The year is a bitter one, colder than any in memory. Outside the wind screams across the moors. It shakes the heavy doors. It whispers through thin window slits. You pull your cloak close. The wool is rough on your skin. You already know one thing. Warmth here is not a gift. You have to fight for it. You might think you need a great fire to live, and a thick blanket too. So before you get settled, take a second to like this video, and subscribe if you like what I do. Tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now turn the lights down. The first thing you notice in the castle is not the size or the fancy flags. It is the cold. It moves under the doors. It gets deep in your bones. Your fingers hurt within the first hour. The stone walls meant to keep you safe now feel like blocks of ice. They breathe chill into every hall. You walk on the stone floor of the great hall. Your boots make a soft sound. Torches on the wall hiss in the draught. Each one is a small fight against the dark. Their light dances on old wall hangings, pictures of hunts and battles. The colors are faded from age, but they hang there for looks and for warmth. They help a little to keep the cold out. You can hear yourself breathe in this big room. Above you a draught sings in the roof beam, like a ghost song. In winter everything in the castle makes a sound. Wood grinds, chain mail links as guards move. Water drips down the walls. Staying warm here was an art. The people here had no heaters. They used layers instead. Layers of cloth. Layers of people, layers of hope. Fires burned in huge fireplaces, big enough to cook a whole lot. But even those big fires rarely warmed the whole room. You could sit right by the fire and still feel cold on your neck. The funny thing is this. Castles were made to protect, not to be cozy. Their stone walls were very thick, great for stopping arrows, bad for keeping heat. The same cold stone that kept enemies out also kept the warmth out. The builders thought about defense, not comfort. So you find small windows, big holes, high ceilings, great for echoes and shouts, but terrible for a cozy sleep. Experts think inside many castles in deep winter, it could freeze even indoors. Imagine waking up to frost on your bed curtains, or your water jug frozen solid. You lit the fire before sunrise, but the cold stayed like a bad guest. Here's a fun fact. Some old records say rich nobles had small metal bowls with hot coals. They kept them near their feet during a medieval space heater. A servant's job was to replace the coals, so the lord's toes did not freeze while he ate. But there is a strange beauty in this hard life. Stand in the great hall. Look at the flickering fire. You see, warmth was more than physical. It was social. It was emotional. People gathered around the fire, not just to live, but to feel alive. That is where they shared news, sang song, filled the quiet with company. Picture the scene. A long oak table marked by knives and time. The lord's family sits wrapped in furs, hands held toward the fire. Servants move quickly. Their breath is white in the cold air. Dogs sleep near the fire, tails moving in dreams. The smell of burning oak mixes with meat and wet wool. The firelight paints everyone in golden shadow. It is easy to dream of the past, but this was no storybook. The cold did not stop. Winter was a test. Castles in the far north or high mountains were the west. Writers said wine turned to slushing cups. Ink froze in the ink pots. One monk in the 1300s said his paper cracked as he wrote in January. People still argue if that was true, but people survived. The same walls that chilled them also stood against storms and attack. The castle was a puzzle, a place of power and discomfort. The flickering torches, the many layers of wool, the constant work to hold heat. This was the rhythm of life here. Use it by the fire, now just like they did. The flames pop and sigh. Sparks fly up and vanish above. You can almost feel the ghosts of old people near you. A cook rubbing her hands A night warming his boots, a child watching the firelight. The warmth you share with them is faint, but it is real. It lasts through time. Outside, the wind still walks the walls, looking for a way in. The stars shine above, bright and cold. The castle stands, its stones locked in ice, its torches still burning. As you watch the fire, you start to wonder, not just how they lived, but how they kept their hearts from freezing too. Because warmth here was never just about the fire. It was about the people crowded close, sharing breath and stories. It was the sound of laughter on stone, hands held near the coals, the quiet promise that no one faced the cold alone. In that thought you find a quiet comfort. The castle may be cold, but the human heart then underneath burns brighter than any torch. You wake to the sound of dripping water in the dark. Water slides down a stone wall, gathers into drops, falls with a soft tap. The fire in the great hall is now just coals. The cold has come back like a thief. You pull your blanket tighter and stand up. Your breath is a cloud in the air. Each step echoes in the empty space. It reminds you how small you are in this huge shell of stone and wood. The castle design is amazing, yes, but it is also a great trap for cold. The walls that make you wonder are part of a smart but cruel system. They were built to last, not to be cozy. Put your hand on one wall. You feel the cold seep in like a living pulse. These stones, granite, horse and stone, store cold like bread stores air. By midwinter, they give it off steadily, taking warmth from anyone who stands too close. And you start to see the sense. Castles were forts first, homes second. They were meant to scare and to endure. The builders thought of enemies, not frost. The thick walls that stopped weapons also blocked the sun. The tall towers gave archers a good view, but became frozen in January. The moat that shone in summer became a sheet of ice echoing the wind. A simple history fact. In the 1100s, many castles used lime mortar, a mix that took years to dry inside the walls. They say even years later, wetness could seep out in the cold. It condensed on the stone like sweat. The result was always being damp, a wet chill no fire could remove. That wetness between the stones also meant warmth had no place to go. The castle was less a cozy home, and more a fancy icebox. People did not think about insulation like we do. They thought about layers and survival. You walk the halls feeling drafts through it or cracks. Every archway funnels the wind. I mean, bit of physics the builders did not plan for. Or maybe they did. Airflow was needed for smoke to escape. Comfort was traded for clean air. You can almost hear the old engineers say, better cold than choking. Experts still debate if this was on purpose, or just trial and error. Some say the builders knew but accepted it. Others think they did not know how bad their design was. Either way, the result was the same. Great halls that felt like wind tunnels in winter. The ceiling is high above you, beams black from years of smoke. It is beautiful in a grim way. A high roof did two things. It kept fires from burning the ceiling, and let heat rise and vanish. The warmth you want goes up out of reach. It gathers in the rafters, warming only shadow. And then there are the floors. Stone tiles are impressive, yes, but utterly without mercy. You hear your boots scrape and echo. Think of the servants and guards who walked here, their souls stiff with cold, their breath visible even inside. Some castles used rushes or straw on the floor, like a rough carpet, but it was messy and not clean. Rats loved it. Still, people preferred straw underfoot to the icy bite of bare stone. In private rooms things were a little better, but not much. The floors there might have woven mats or animal skins. Some used dried herbs like lavender or mint to freshen the air and keep pests away. As you walk you can almost smell crushed thyme in the cold air, sweet and dry. The castle cold was not the same everywhere. Each spot had its own little climate. The kitchens with big ovens were very hot. The great hall was okay while fires burned, but the halls and stairs were like paths through the Arctic. A noble might eat in comfort, then freeze walking to bed, and that bed often in a room off the main hall, was its own battle against the cold. Walls as thick as a man did little to stop drafts from window slits or stone cracks. The narrow windows made for defense were also natural air conditioners. Curtains and wall hangings and faux were not just for looks but to make barriers. Every layer of cloth mattered. A fun note from a 1300 house record says, "Some lords lined walls with wood panels, not for beauty, but because wood holds warmth, like skin." The idea was that wood softer than stone trapped air and gave a little insulation. It was not perfect but made the room feel a bit warmer. You stop by one such panel now, tracing the grain with your fingers. It is smooth from age and a little warmer than the wall. You picture the lord here centuries ago, hands behind his back waiting for spring. Outside, the castle design makes the cold worse in mean ways. The outer walls, huge and proud, also create yards that funnel wind. The towers catch every gust, turning the inside into a swirl of snow. If you step outside for a moment, the cold cuts you like a knife. Banners crack like whips in the wind. Even the ravens look upset, huddled on walls with puffed feathers. But here is the puzzle. This same design that hurt the people also kept them safe. The stone was cold, but it was fireproof, arrow-proof, and, most important, time-proof. That is why so many castles still stand. The people who built them lived through winters that would break hearts today, yet they left monuments that last like mountains. You can respect the trade. They gave up comfort for something that lasts. You sit back near the great hall's fading fire, wrapping your cloak tight. You listen to the wind sigh outside, and the low groan of wood in the cold. There is a strange calm here, a feeling you are part of something bigger and older. The cold is not pleasant, yes, but it is also grounding. It reminds you warmth was never free. It had to be earned, built, and shared. So you sit waiting for the first or dawn light to slip through the window slits, promising another day of smokestone and fight against the cold. The dawn light barely comes through the wall slits, pale and slow. The great hall feels like a cave after the fired eyes. The cold has filled every bit of air. Your steps echo softly as you go to the fireplace. Last night's embers hide under thin ash. A few orange sparks still flicker under their stubborn and alive. You kneel, stir them gently with a poker. A glow comes back. You are dry wood that crackles as flames rise again. The heart of the castle was not its throne or chapel. It was the fireplace. In many ways, this one square of heat was the soul of life back then. Everyone came near it, from noble to servant, drawn by the same need to feel warmth in their fingers. Old records say even big feasts were often held near the largest fireplace, not just for show but to live. When you stand close to one of these old fireplaces, you feel its power. The stones around it are smooth from centuries of hands. The soot-blackened shelf above tells of countless winters. A big fire was a sign of wealth and power, because wood was not always easy to find. Forest, sneer castles were managed with care. The right to gather firewood was sometimes worth more than gold. Oddly, some of the biggest fires in castles were not meant to warm the room at all. They were used for cooking, boiling laundry, even making ale. The smoke from these fires went through open rafters and out holes in the roof, or that was the hope. You can picture sitting in this hole, trying to eat, as the air gets thick with smoke. That sticks to your hair and stings your eyes. In early castles, before chimneys were common, smoke just gathered in the roof and drifted out a vent. This worked to okay until rain or snow came in the same hole. There are notes of servants putting buckets on tables to catch drips during meals. A picture both sad and charming. A feast under a smoky ceiling, drops falling between plates and cups. Some experts still ask if these early holes were as bad as we think. The upper air, thick with smoke, might have acted as a simple insulation layer, keeping heat closer to the floor. Others think it was just awful, a choice between warmth and choking. The truth is likely in the middle. But by the 1100s and 1200s, things changed. Builders tried flue stone channels that took smoke up through the wall and out above the roof. This was a big change. The first real chimneys appeared in Norman castles, letting separate rooms have their own fireplaces. It is hard to say how big that was. For the first time, private rooms could be heated, without filling them with soot. Picture one of those new rooms. A small chamber, thick wall hangings, the soft sound of fire in the flue. The smell of wood smoke stays yet, but the air is clearer, softer. The flame dances behind an iron grate. The glow paints ripples on the stone floor. A little known fact about medieval fires: they were rarely let die completely. Tending the fire was a near holy job. The firekeeper, often a servant, made sure embers lived through the night. Putting the flame out entirely was bad luck, even dangerous. To start fresh from flint each morning wasted time, and risked losing the house spirit, as old belief said. As you listen to the hiss and pop of new logs catching, you start to see why the fireplace was so special. It was life itself, a circle of light and safety in a world of stone and froth. Around it, people told stories, planned hunts, shared meals, whispered gossip. Without the fire, the castle would feel like a tomb. In the great halls of the rich, the fire size was part of their name. Writers described fireplaces wide enough to walk through, logs as thick as tree trunks. Yet for all that show, only those sitting a few steps from the flame really felt the heat. Farther away, the temperature dropped fast. That is why servants and guards huddled near doorways, wrapped in cloaks, their eyes looking toward the center, where the noble family sat warm. They show smoke stains still on rafters above old fireplaces, a lasting mark of their flawed design. Even today, if you stand under an old chimney in a restored castle, you can smell it, a ghost mix of wood grease and centuries of burnt oak. Yet even with its flaws, the fireplace stayed a gathering spot, a source not just of heat, but of humanity. It was the one place where ranks softened for a bit. Picture a cold night like this. The Lord stares into the fire, lost in thought. I made tends a kettle, a dog sleeps at his feet. For a few moments all share the same fragile warmth. The fire crackles again, ending up sparks that vanish before reaching the beam. You can feel the air change, no longer biting, but almost soft, alive. Outside, the world is covered in froth, but inside this ring of orange light, there is comfort. Not everyone agrees when fire stopped being just useful and became emotional, something that shaped medieval life. Some historians think it was always both. I too learned the sign and Eden the ritual, the way the fire light danced on faces, the way it whispered inside. Maybe it reminded people of something eternal, something that could never be fully put out. As you sit here watching the flames twist like ribbons, you see that warmth in a medieval castle was not about luxury, it was about not giving up. The quiet fight of light against endless cold. The warmth of the great whole fire fades as you go deeper into the castle's upper room, following the thin curl of smoke through narrow passages. The air thickens with a bitter smell of charred wood and something older, metallic, like burnt iron. It is easy to forget medieval fireplaces were as dangerous as they were good. When they worked, they were a blessing. When they did not, they turned holes into choking fog. You climb a spiral stair that twists like a shell, each step wet with damp. The smoke sticks to the walls here too. Centuries of soot have painted them black and brown. At the top you enter a smaller room, an early try at a private heated chamber. It feels small, the air stale but a little warm. A small fire crackles in the corner, its flame pulled weakly into a rough flue cut into the wall. Chimneys were a big change, but they were also moody. Notes from the 1200 seconds say servants spent hours trying to get a fire to draw right, sometimes waving blankets or even standing in the fireplace to guide air. The flue often went up at odd angles, built by masons learning through trial and error. When the wind changed, smoke poured back into the room, making eyes water and lungs burn. Oddly, medieval people thought smoke was good for health. They said it made lungs strong and drove away bad humors. Some thought kids who grew up in smoky rooms would be tougher. Whether this was hope or need, no one can say. But the smell of wood smoke became the smell of winter life. Proof from digs at places like Dover and Rochester says early chimneys were often lined with clay tiles or thin brick to stop the stone from cracking from heat. But this did not always work. It rose unevenly, so it built up and sparks could light roof beams. Many castle fires, some very bad, started in these chimneys, burning upper floors before anyone knew. It was a puzzle. The same thing that brought warmth could also bring ruin. You look up at the dark mouth of the flue above you. It feels almost alive, breathing, shifting with the draft. The sound of wind moaning through the passage is eerie, like a whisper from deep in the wold. In winter those sounds never stopped. They were the castle's own voice groaning against the cold. A note from a 1302 steward's log describes the constant care these systems needed. Every winter, masons and servants climbed the roof to clear certain blocks, often while snow fell around them. It was dirty, dangerous work, but needed. One blocked flue could fill a whole keep with smoke in minutes. Some experts today say medieval builders knew more about airflow than we think. The placement of windows, arrow slits and roof vents often made a simple air system. Others think it was mostly luck, a patch of fixes, not a grand plan. Still, standing in this room, you feel an uneasy balance between control and chaos. The smoke swirls around your head as if alive, coiling toward the flue's narrow throat. You cough, wave it away. Imagine the daily life of those who lived with this. Even the rich were not safe. Writers told of queens leaving smoky rooms with red eyes, and kings ordering fireplaces rebuilt in midwinter in frustration. Comfort, it seems, was a moving target. Not everyone could afford to put in or keep up these systems. In smaller keeps, fires still burned in open pits. Servants hung wall cloths to trap the haze above their heads. Some houses even had special smoke rooms, where meats and herbs were hung on purpose to use the constant haze. If you lived in a castle, you learned to live with smoke. It became as normal as the air itself. Strangely, some of that smoke had a hidden blessing. It cured wood beams, hardened plaster, and drove out bugs. In a twist of medieval practicality, discomfort often also preserved things. What choked lungs also kept the castle standing. You move closer to the small fireplace, staring into the orange flicker. It is easy to picture the patience and ritual of lighting these fires. Flints and steels, bundles of straw, a careful breath of air. There was a quiet act repeated countless times each day. Fire was not just heat, it was a task, a rhythm. A daily talk between human will and the wild elements. Outside, the wind rises again, pressing on the narrow window. The flame shakes, bends sideways, then steadies. The chimney hums softly, drawing better, now the air clearing. You take a slow breath, the smoke sting fading, and see the difference a well-built flue could make. A good chimney was not just a luxury, it was a survival miracle. The people here learned to read smoke like a language. The color told them what wood was burning. The way it curled showed if the draft was strong or weak. Black smoke meant wet logs or a blocked flue. Pale blue meant heat hot enough to melt lead. Whole lives revolved around understanding this delicate talk. Some medieval books even have notions about taming fire. A monk writing in the edge of a prayer book once complained that smoke from the writing room half turned pages grey, left ink tasting bitter. The detail feels oddly human, annoyance lasting through centuries of soot. And yet, despite the endless smoke, the coughing, the fire risk, no one could picture life without these roaring fireplaces. The castle may have been a fort of cold stone, but the fireplace made it human. It turned lifeless rooms into living spaces, even if those spaces were half choked with haze. As you turn to leave, you look once more at the dancing flame. The smoke no longer feels like an intruder. It feels like the castle breathing, sighing with the memory of 1,000 winters lived through. The fire hums softly behind you as you go back to your room. But even here, warmth is a fleeting guest. Your breath curls white in the dim light. The stone walls glow faintly with reflected torchlight. You reach for the pile of clothes at the foot of your bed, a mix of wool, linen and fur, and start putting them on one by one. In this world, survival starts not with walls or wood, but with what you wear. Daily clothes in a medieval castle in winter were not about style, they were about lasting. Every thread had a purpose, every fabric a kind of armor against the cold. Writings from the late Middle Ages described nobles wearing 5 or 6 layers inside, linen shirts next to the skin and wool tunics, fur-lined coats, and finally a heavy cloak pinned at the shoulder. The goal was not elegance, it was insulation. Records from monastery lists show even monks, those models of simple life, had special winter robes, thick hoods and padded shoes allowed by seasonal rules. Their plain austerity bent under the weight of practicality. You can almost see them huddled in their cloisters, robes brushing cold stone floors as they move like quiet shadows. A curious detail appears in house rolls from the 1200 seconds. Women of status sometimes lined gowns with squirrel fur, specifically the soft belly fur of northern types. It was not just luxury, it trapped hair in a way that made it very warm. When you think of shiny pictures of queens in gleaming robes, imagine under them a hidden lining of tiny pelts sewn in neat rows. Some experts still ask if fur really made such a big difference, or if its symbolic power, the visible proof of wealth, was more important. But anyone who has stood in an unheated room in February would agree. It must have helped. Wool was the real hero though. In medieval Europe it was everywhere spun, woven and sewn into every shape. The smell of lanolin, that natural grease in untreated wool, gave clothes a faint animal scent and water resistance. It kept damp away and warmth close to the skin. Linen by contrast felt clean and light, but in winter it was just the underlayer, the quiet go between body and wool. You put your arm through a sleeve, hear the faint scratch of rough fabric on itself. Each move carries sound like dry leaves in wind. The wool is heavy, pressing comfortingly against you, and for the first time all morning you stop shaking. In richer homes the art of dressing for warmth became elaborate. Nobles collected imported furs, marten from Scandinavia, fox from Russia, even lynx from Central Europe. To wear such things was not just to stay warm. It was to say that winter itself could be tamed by your money. For servants and guards warmth came from simpler means. Laid homespun woolen patched cloaks, mended year after year until they looked like maps of wear and survival. It is almost poetic how clothing became a language of endurance. Even the way clothes fastened had a purpose. Laces, ties and belts, let it be sealed in or let out as needed. In the dead of night when the temperature fell, people might even sleep in their day clothes, wrapping a cloak on top. Pajamas as you know them were centuries away. Notes from travelers describe the sound of sleeping quarters at night, the soft rustle of wool, the creak of bed frames, the occasional sneeze from someone wrapped to type. Fire rarely reached those upper rooms, so bodies themselves became furnaces. Couples slept pressed together, servants piled near the fireplace, children nestled under their parents' cloaks. A less-known custom worth picturing. Before bed many houses heated stones on the fire, put them in metal or clay pots wrapped in cloth, and placed them between the sheets. These simple bed warmers gave off heat for hours, though they sometimes burned linen or startled sleepers when they cooled fast. You might think of it as the ancestor of your modern hot water bottle, only heavier and riskier. As you fasten the last clasp of your cloak, you notice each layer has its own feel. The soft nap of wool, the slick smoothness of fur, the faint prickle where thread rubs skin. Warmth here is something you touch. It lies in the feel of fabric, not the air around you. A few modern historians suggest medieval people grew thicker skin literally and in spirit. Repeated time in the cold hardened them in ways hard to imagine now. Frostbite was common but tolerance grew. A writer from Burgundy once boasted his lord's soldiers could sleep on frozen ground as easy as on feather beds. Whether this is pride or truth, it captures the spirit of the age. Lasting was honor. At the same time, layers meant something. A servant's rough neck showed his place in the world, as clearly as a knight's gold-trimmed cloak. The colder the climate, the clearer the ranks. Some shook, others shone. Yet even the richest lord wrapped in imported fox furs could not escape the bite of January wind through the tower stairs. You pull your hood up and look out a narrow window. The world outside covered in white. Snowflakes drift through the slit, carried by a playful gust. You can smell iron and smoke on the air. The scent of winter's breath mixed with yesterday's fire. Dressing becomes ritual. Each morning starts the same slow process. Shirt, hose to knitcoat, cloak. Each layer feels like an active fight against the world outside. In that repetition, there is comfort, a rhythm older than any prayer. And as you look toward the dying fire, you realize something small. Warmth in this world is never constant. It is earned, gathered, and guarded, just like faith or loyalty. To live through the cold meant to respect it. To understand that even stone and silk bow to winter's rule. You flex your hands inside your wool gloves. The rough fibers scratch faintly at your skin, and you feel the smallest pulse of heat within. You are ready to face another day of frost, wrapped in the quiet wind of fabric and endurance. The hall narrows as you walk toward the sleeping room. The torches dimmer, hear the air thick with quiet. The sound of your boots often rushes underfoot, muffle each step. You push open a heavy wood door, and the cold meets you like a wall, sharp, dry, almost personal. This is where the night was lived through, not enjoyed. Medieval bedrooms, especially in stone castles, were not the warm shelters we think of today. They were rooms of lusting, often small, drafty, and unheated. Once the evening fire died by morning frost decorated the walls, and water in bowls turned solid overnight. Writers noted ink frozen pots, and breath left thin crystals on bed curtains. Comfort was a short-lived dream, one made through creativity, not luxury. You step closer to the bed. It is huge. High enough you need a stool to get in. The frame creaks softly when you touch it, repolished by generations. Under the canopy hang thick curtains of woolen velvet, a medieval answer to insulation. Pull them shut and you trap a small pocket of air, warmer than the chill outside. It is like building a tent inside your own room, a private hideaway in a sea of cold stone. History records from house accounts show such beds were prized, often worth more than the land the house stood on. Feathers, wool, straw, every filling told a story of status. The richest nobles slept on feather mattresses thick enough to sink into, while servants made do with straw pads on the floor. Even so, everyone shared one thing: layers and layers of bedding, linen and fur blankets, heavy cloth quilts, sometimes even cloaks thrown on for extra weight. Curiously, many families and their helpers shared beds, not always for love, but for survival. The combined warmth of bodies made the best heating system known. Traveled Iris mentioned strangers sleeping side by side in inns, a practice accepted without shame. Warmth was shared, privacy was a luxury that could wait for spring. A particularly odd detail survives from a 1400 English list, describing bed helpers hired for old nobles, servants chosen for health and youth, to sleep near their masters on cold nights. It sounds strange now, but back then body heat was a practical resource. Like firewood in a world of little, nothing warm was wasted. Dig evidence suggests some of the richest lords had bed frames lined with iron warming pans. Small trays filled with embers slid under the sheets before sleep. The faint hiss of hot metal on linen, the smell of ashen smoke, the short joy of radiant heat, all gone within an hour. There was a risk to one careless move could set the bedding on fire. Records of such fires, though rare, still appear. A grim reminder that warmth and danger were constant friends. Not everyone agrees how good these measures were. Some historians believe the bed curtains and layered quilts really kept temperatures okay. Others argue most nights were spent half frozen anyway. But you can picture it, the quiet inside, the curtained cocoon, candlelight flickering through heavy fabric, the whisper of wind outside muffled to a distant hum. You climb onto the high bed, now pulling the curtain aside. The mattress sinks under your weight, soft but uneven. The sheets are cool, at first shocking even. but your body's warmth begins to spread slowly through the layers. The scent of the bedding is earthy, a mix of wall-dried lavender and faint smoke from the fireplace below. Someone put a sprig of herbs under the pillow. Part superstition, part air freshener. Medieval people liked such small comforts. They stuffed mattresses with dried rushes mixed with mint or sage, believing the smell kept illness away. A few even sprinkled wine on the sheets to clean them. A curious ritual that probably made the room smell more festive than clean. You lie back staring at the canopy above. It is embroidered with faded patterns, fleur-de-lis perhaps, or hunting scenes gone soft with age. The bed creaks faintly with each breath, and beyond the curtains you hear the soft sounds of the castle settling, with shifting wind humming down the chimney. Footsteps echoing somewhere far below. And winter sleep came early and stayed long. Nights stretched endlessly and without clocks or lamps. People often woke in the dark, whispered prayers, or shared quiet talk before drifting back again. Some scholars call its sleep a rhythm of rest broken into to habits. By watchful break during that time lovers might talk softly. Servants stoke the fire, travelers tell stories to each other in the dark. You picture that silence now, the gentle rustle of blankets, the faint crackle of a dying fire, the slow breathing of someone asleep nearby. There is peace in it, a peace born, not of comfort, but of acceptance. And yet even here danger lived in the cold. Through rare, flow and damp air caused what doctors of the time called winter fevers. People huddled so close to fires their faces blistered while their backs froze. Cures included spiced wine, heated stones and charms blessed by priests. Some believed sleeping near an open flame invited wandering spirits. Others thought the fire itself was holy protection. One court doctor in the 1300s wrote, "To sleep cold is to wake dull of wit," advising his noble patients to keep rooms as warm as spring. Easy to say when your windows are wide enough to whistle. As you pull the curtains shut again, sealing yourself in the dark, you understand something deep. Warmth in this world was not a state, it was a chase. It slipped away each night and had to be hunted again, each morning like light itself. The sheets rustle softly as you turn the mattress size. The wind moans through the walls an old song of persistence. You close your eyes and the cold does not vanish, but it becomes something manageable, something shared by everyone, whoever lived behind these walls. And for a short moment, you almost understand how they did it, how they lasted not just through cleverness, but through rhythm, through ritual, through the quiet knowledge that even in the hardest cold sleep still comes. The next morning arrives grey and reluctant. A mist hangs low over the yard like a blanket. You wake to the familiar chill creeping into your bones again. Despite the heavy bedding, your fingers are stiff as you push the bed curtains aside and step onto the cold stone floor. The first breath of air bites your nose, sharp, clean and unforgiving. You look toward the narrow slit of a window, where faint light comes through, soft but icy. The windows of a medieval castle are a wonder of contradiction. They were made for defense, not comfort. Those narrow openings meant to let arrows out, but not in. Let in drafts as well as they kept out enemies. Even the bigger halls with larger windows had the same problem. Glass was rare, costly, unbreakable. Most of the time these openings were covered with something else entirely. Records from the 1100s show only the richest houses could afford real glass windows. And even then, the panes were small, set together with lead strips in diamond shape. The glass itself was rarely clear, it shimmered with waves and bubble, catching sunlight like ripples on water, pretty to look at, but useless for insulation. It leaked out as easy as candle smoke. For the rest of society, windows were sealed with horned parchment or oiled cloth. Clever solutions, though far from perfect. Cow horn scraped thin until see-through gave a faint milky glow to rooms. When sunlight passed through it, the effect was soft and gold, almost soothing. But at night the same horn turned brittle and wind blew right through its seams. In many castle shutters were the real defense against the cold. Heavy wood panels swung closed each evening, unbarred tight. When you walk near the window now, You can see the marks of the iron hinge, blackened by years of use. You unbolt it carefully and push open the shutter. The blast of air that greets you is brutal, slicing across your face, with the raw smell of snow and wood smoke. Outside, the yard is covered in white. The stables steam faintly with the breath of horses. Somewhere a bell rings for morning prayers. You close the shutter fast, the thud echoing through the quiet room. Some experts point out window seats, those cozy nooks in castle walls. We're not for romance as much as survival. The deep spaces made by thick walls offered a small escape from draught. People sat in them wrapped in furs, reading, sewing, or watching the grey world outside, careful to stay in that narrow band of okay air. You run your hand along the stone, their smooth, cool, a surface that has known both fingertips and frost. Oddly noble, sometimes hung small curtains or draped fabrics across window spaces, not to block light, but to trap warmth. It is a detail easy to miss in paintings. The folds of velvet or wool pulled tight across the frame, a simple but good form of insulation. And yet for all these steps the cold found its way in. The walls themselves breathed wetness, condensed on stone, froze overnight, then melted by day, creating a cycle that never ended. The only real fix was sunlight, and in winter there was little of that. Some experts disagree if medieval builders truly understood heat keeping. There is proof that later castles, especially in southern England and France, began using more closed spaces and smaller window openings, specifically to cut drafts. Others argue it was just a side effect of better military design, not comfort. Whatever the reason, the pattern is clear. As centuries passed, castles became a bit cozier, but never warm by modern standards. You sit by the window now, watching your breath cloud and fade in the air. You can almost picture a lady of the castle doing the same. Her embroidery on her lap, fingers half numb, a candle burning beside her. She would pause often, not from distraction, but to warm her hands above the tiny flame. The wax would drip, cooling on the sill. The world outside would stay distant, muffled by the storm. The oiled parchment covering the upper slit of the window flutters faintly. The scent of tallow from the candle mixes with the smell of cold stone. Every scent reminds you of, here is something bargained, never guaranteed. Even the light feels tired, as though winter has drained its strength. A rarely mentioned practice from northern castles was the use of window boards, slabs of leather or wood wrapped in cloth wedged into gaps to block the worst drafts. Some were even painted or embroidered to match the wall hangings. You can picture the quiet satisfaction of tucking them in place at dusk, sealing the castle like a ship before a storm. You run your fingers along the edge of the shutter again. The wood is scarred but strong. Imagine the hundreds of hands that closed it before you. Maids, squires, nobles, all doing the same simple act. The act itself feels timeless. Close out the wind, keep the warmth in. Yet there was a poetic irony in these frozen windows. While they failed to keep out the cold, they let people see the beauty of winter. The silver shine of snow, the dark pattern of trees against the sky. Candle light reflected in ice. One medieval poet wrote that frost paints the pain finer than any craftsman. A feeling born perhaps from someone too cold to do anything but admire it. You draw the shutter closed once more, fasten the bolt and sit back in the half-light. The faint glow through the horn panels softens the room edges, turning the walls to golden shadow. For a moment it feels almost peaceful, as though the world outside has paused just for you. And as you pull your cloak tighter, you realize something simple yet deep. The people of this age did not fight the cold. They lived beside it, learned from it, and wove it into their days like thread into cloth. Every window, every curtain, every breath of air told the same quiet story of endurance. The castle holds that story still in every draft that brushes your cheek, every whisper of wind through horn and shutter. A reminder that warmth is sweetest only when it is hard-won. Your fingers have barely warmed from closing the shutters, when you notice something small and practical on a side table, an object so plain it might be missed. It is a brass bowl with holes like a honeycomb sitting on 3 tiny legs. When you lift it, it is heavier than it looks. Inside, ashen, faintly glowing embers still burn. A medieval hand warmer in a castle where big fireplaces warmed the noble, and damp halls troubled the servant. These portable things were salvation. They were small, clever, and surprisingly nice, passed from hand to hand like little sons. When the great hall fire could not follow you, you carried a spark of it instead. Digs have found examples of such warmers in castles across Europe. Round or square boxes of metal, often brass or iron, with carved patterns that let heat out. Charcoal or coals were put inside, sometimes on a bed of ash to cut smoke. The heat was gentle, lasting hours, and easy to refresh. The rich lined the handles with wood or leather so they would not burn their palms. It is strange to think such a simple thing could mean the difference between comfort and misery. Picture a lady of the court, fingers stiff with cold, holding one of these glowing bowls while she reads or soothes. The faint warmth would creep into her hands, her sleeves steaming slightly from the heat below. For travelers, it was a pocket fireplace, a reminder that civilization could be carried, glowing softly through the dark. But hand warmers were not alone in their cleverness. You look toward the floor and see another medieval idea, the foot stove. A small wood box vented on top, filled with embers, set under chairs or under blankets. Carriage riders, church-goers, and noble women alike used them. It is said during long winter church services, even priests relied on these humble things to keep from freezing mid-prayer. Curiously, some houses gave these devices names. A French noblewoman's diary from the 1400s mentions her little friend, a silver hand warmer shaped like a dove. She wrote about feeding it coals in the morning, the way one might care for a pet. There is something deeply human about that, a relationship with warmth itself, close and caring. Not everyone approved of such indulgence though. Records from religious orders suggest portable warmers were frowned upon in holy life. Cold, one abbot wrote, is the rightful friend of humility. Still, you can picture a monk's sleeves over his fingers, looking with want at a noble's shiny brazier. Over time, these small tools became signs of refinement as much as need. Some were made of silver and engraved with family crests, others painted with scenes of saints or hunts. The poor made do with clay pots or heated stones wrapped in cloth, less fancy but just as good. In a world where every ember-matted invention was shared by need, the faint scent of ash stays in the room as you hold the hand warmer close. The heat is subtle, more hint than feeling, but it is enough. You can feel how these things must have changed the rhythm of life. They let people move, read, work without the constant stop of cold. Some historians argue this simple technology changed building itself. By the late Middle Ages, smaller rooms and spaces became more common, designed to trap the heat of braziers and portable stove. The idea of personal warmth, local, close-shifted house spaces were used. Others claim it was mere chance, the result of growing privacy among the rich. Whatever the cause, the link between comfort and new ideas began here, glowing quietly in a brass box. You picture carrying one through the castle halls, your hand wrapped around its smooth surface, the faint warmth seeping into your skin. Torches flicker against the walls as you pass. Your footsteps echo in rhythm with the faint clink of metal. Every breath you let out steams in the cold air, yet you feel almost safe, protected by your own little sphere of heat. In the servants' rooms, similar devices glow in the corners, though cruder and black from youth. A group of women's, it mending clothes, their laughter soft, each resting child fingers over the shared brazier. A child leans close, eyes wide at the orange glow. For them, warmth is not luxury, it is togetherness. One of the more surprising details in travel accounts is how portable heat became part of good manners. Offering someone a hand warmer during talk was seen as a kind gesture, even flirtation. Imagine the closeness of it, passing warmth from one hand to another, the faint scent of metal and smoke mixing with perfume and breath. The room around you hums softly now, the castle walls no longer quite so hostile. You set the little brazier back on the table, watching the last ember wink at you before fading. The cold starts to creep in again, almost at once, but something about it feels softer, less cruel. You realize in this world people did not just battle the cold, they talked with it. Every object, every ember was a truce between nature and human will, a fragile agreement that warmth could exist if only for a while. And, as the last curl of smoke drifts upward, you can almost hear the unspoken thanks that must have filled these rooms. A sigh of relief, a whisper of gratitude, every time a spark cotton stayed alive. The morning suns lanced through the narrow horn-covered window, weak and watery, painting the stone floor in stripes of pale gold. You wrap your cloak around you and climb the winding stair that leads to the upper rooms, the noble floors. Here the cold changes character. It is not just biting anymore. It feels proud, aloof, as though the higher you go, the more the air forgets to carry warmth. Status had its price in a medieval castle. The great lords and ladies lived above everyone else, literally, while their servants had the lower floors where kitchens and stores gave off faint heat. To be up high meant prestige, but it also meant exposure. You can almost feel the irony. The richer you were, the colder your nights became. Old accounts describe how nobles fought the chill with every advantage. Money could buy huge fireplaces, fur-lined furniture, thick rugs, and canopies that turned beds into small forts. Yet none of it truly beat the cold. In winter, even royal rooms could freeze. Candles flickered and dyed wall hangings swayed from unseen drafts, and breath hung in the air like whispers. A writer at Windsor Castle once noted, His Majesty's upper room was fair, but ill-tempered in the wind. The phrasing feels almost polite, ill-tempered, as though the room itself were a moody friend, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. You can picture the king staring irritably at the flickering fire, wrapping his cloak tighter, muttering about the warmth below in the kitchens. Oddly, nobles rarely went down to those warmer levels. It was a matter of pride as much as practicality. To eat, sleep, or stay near the servants' fireplaces was to blur the social order. Warmth, like everything else, was layered. The low-born baked by the fire, the high-born froze under silk. And yet the upper floors held beauty. The sunlight, when it did appear, hit these rooms first, pouring through colored glass or oiled parchment, casting patterns on the walls. During the short winter days, courtiers followed these moving rays like cats, drifting from one patch of warmth to the next. Some building historians suggest castles were designed on purpose, so the lords' rooms faced the morning sun, a symbolic gesture of divine favor. Others think it was just a happy chance. But when you stand here now in this high room bathed in fragile light, you can sense both logic and poetry at play. You move closer to the fireplace, a smaller, more ornate one than those below. Its shelf is carved with vines and beasts, its half lined with shiny tiles that reflect the faint shimmer of flame. The smoke rises smoothly. This time whoever built this flue knew their craft. The warmth, though modest, spreads evenly through the space. Still the air stays thin. You can feel drafts trickling from arrow slits behind wall hangings. Tiny rivers of cold no decoration could fully stop. A servant might come in soon to pull the curtains tighter, tucking them behind carved benches, muttering under her breath about the foolishness of rich men and their high rooms. A rather missed feature of these upper rooms was their flooring. Unlike the bare stone below, any work covered with planks of oak or pine. It was not just for beauty or sound, it was a defense against the cold that seeped up through the masonry. Under those boards, straw or dried moss might be packed as simple insulation. When you step across it, the sound changes, a low wood thud, not a hollow echo. It is the sound of wealth trying to copy warmth. You stop by the window seat where a fur throw lies draped. The fur is dark, perhaps fox or wolf, its surface still glossy after centuries of use. You run your fingers along it and almost see the lady of the house sitting here, looking down at her snow-covered lens. The world below would seem distant, silent, perhaps comforting in its stillness. Not everyone agrees nobles suffered more from the cold than their servants. Some say privilege gave enough layers, literally unsocially, to ease discomfort. Yet the written laments of kings, queens, and courtiers suggest otherwise. The poet Christine D. Piz and once described winter in a castle as a season of siege, when the fire mocks by warmth half given. That image stays, the idea that even in plenty people still felt the sting of lack. As you stand near the fire, a faint crack echoes through the room. The sound of wood shrinking in the cold. The castle speaks in such moments. A groan, you sigh, there as if the whole structure stretches its stone shoulders. Against the frost you realize heat does not simply vanish here. It moves, hides, finds refuge in corners where it can live a few moments longer. There is a small writing desk by the wall, its surface crowded with papers and quills. You can picture someone sitting here centuries ago, huddled in a clench, shaking as they wrote letters by candlelight. The ink, thick from cold, would drag across the page, perhaps a note to a far friend lamenting the endless winter, or a line of poetry about snow that never melts. You sit in that same spot now, watching your breath rise in thin curls. The air smells of wax and smoke, of age and waiting. For a short moment you can feel the strange beauty in it all. The marriage of luxury and hardship, of power humbled by weather. A modern mind might wonder why they endured it, why not move lower, closer to warmth. But for them height meant authority. The cold was simply the tax of nobility. A price paid for the view, for nearness to heaven, for separation from the common flame. Outside, the wind gathers again, sweeping across the walls. You hear its hollow song through the slits in the stone. A melody that has never stopped since these stones were first laid. You draw closer to the fire, holding out your hands, and watch the light dance over the tiles. The warmth here is a ghost of summer, faint, fleeting, but enough. And you think perhaps that is how the people of this world lived, not expecting to beat winter, but to outlast it. Every breath, every ember, every inch of sunlight was a quiet victory. The cold might own the castle, but the people own their persistence. The echo of your footsteps softens as you go down once more, winding into the belly of the castle, where light grows dim and air grows thick. The scent changes, less frost, more smoke, and something earthy familiar. You pass through a low archway, and suddenly warmth brushes your face like a gentle hand. The kitchen's here, the heart of the castle beats differently. Fire is not decoration, it is survival and work. Great brick fireplaces stretch across the walls, each big enough to roast a whole boar. Copper pots hang on hooks, black from decades of use. The room hums with quiet life, voices of cooks, the clatter of night, the steady hiss of boiling soup. The air is thick with heat and spice, and for the first time in hours, your breath does not turn white. Old house accounts describe castle kitchens as both miracle and chaos. They gave warmth, food, and life itself, but also danger. Open flames danced near, barrels of oil sparks jumped into straw baskets. One careless servant could turn comfort into disaster. Even so, everyone found reasons to linger here in winter. Servants lost errands, guards volunteered for deliveries. Warmth was worth a little scolding. A lesser-known detail about castle kitchens is their clever layout. Builders often put them on the lowest floors or in separate wings, not just to stop fires spreading, but to guide heat upward. Stone flues and vents carried warm air through holes, gently raising the temperature of the rooms above. You can still feel it now, the faint pulse of warmth under your boots, like the castle's hidden bloodstream. Scholars disagree if this system was on purpose or lucky accident. Some building historians believe medieval masons knew more about airflow than we credit them for. Others argue any heat rising to upper floors was just a side effect of endless cooking. But either way, the result was the same. The servants' area became the castle's quiet furnace. You watch as a cook tends a huge pot over the flames. The liquid inside bubbles and sighs, sending up bursts of steam that fog your sight. When she stirs, the smell of onions, herbs, and something savory fills the room. Food here was not only nourishment, it was warmth you could taste. It is easy to see why the kitchen became a haven. Servants drying their hands by the fire, a dog curled under the table, a boy sneaking bites of bread while pretending to polish spoon. The heat softened everyone's mood, blurred, rank, and droll. You can almost hear laughter ripple through the haze. A curious entry in the house book of the Duke of Lancaster around 1380 notes the kitchen fire shall be kept day and night, even when no meal is made. The order was not about convenience, it was about survival. Those great fireplaces gave off steady heat, stopping frost from creeping too deep into the lower stones. The castle itself relied on its kitchen as much as its guards. You move toward one of the smaller fireplaces where flat stones rest near the embers. Bread is baking there slow and fragrant, its crust turning gold. A young girl fans the coals carefully, her cheeks flushed with heat. You crouch beside her, feeling the warmth kiss your skin, the relief immediate and whole. The cook's easy smiles, motioning for you to sit. She pours a ladle of fixed into her, with bowl peas, barley bits of salted meat. The simple meal of the working class. When you taste it, the heat blooms in your chest. Simple and perfect in this place, food and fire blow together, they both keep you alive. Curiously, some of the earliest medieval recipes call for spices, like ginger, cinnamon, and pepper, not for flavor alone, but for their felt warming powers. Doctors of the time believed hot ingredients balanced the body's hues in winter. A rich stew with pepper was not just indulgence, it was medicine. Around you the kitchen through is with rhythm, knives on wood, iron on stone, spoons scraping bowls, the music of daily life. The cooks move with practiced grey sleeves, rolled high faces shiny with sweat. One tends a spit, turning a piece of venison that hisses as its fat drips into the fire. Another kneads dough, her hands moving in steady, comforting circles. Somewhere deeper in the room, you hear the hum of voices, perhaps gossip, perhaps song. This was the castle's beating heart, the place where warmth began each day and spread outward like ripples in water. And yet not all corners of this world were equally bright. Beyond the main fireplaces, the scullery was damp, shadowed, its warmth fading fast. Servants, they scrub pots in cold water until their fingers ache. You step through the doorway and feel the shift at once. The heat vanishes, replaced by wet chill and the metal smell of iron. The contrast is startling, almost cruel. A few steps decide if you shake or sweat. It reminds you how fragile warmth was in this age. It was not evenly shared, pulled, shifted, was stolen and kept. The cooks glowed in their fire haven while the guards above might freeze in watchtowers. Comfort was as layered as class itself. Still in this kitchen all of that feels far away. The fire light gilds, the walls turning soot into gold. You watch the cook ladle out bowls for servants who finished morning duties. Each bowl steaming in the cold air, the way they huddle close, laughing between spoonfuls, is warmth in its purest form, unspoken, shared. Some historians claim this sense of shared survival born from the fire's glow was what held medieval households together. Loyalty was not only forged in war or service, it grew here over boiling pots and shared bread. As you lean back, letting the heat soak through your cloak, you understand. For all its grandeur, a castle without its kitchen would have been a tomb of ice. Hearing the hum of work and the glow of the fire, life went on, not grand, not royal, but human. And when you finally rise to leave, brushing ash from your sleeve, the warmth stays on your skin like a memory. You carry it with you into the colder halls, a reminder that every ember, no matter how small, has the power to defy the frost. The scent of the kitchen still clings to your cloak as you step into the next hall. A mix of smoke, spice, and something faintly sweet. Your stomach hums with the echo of stew, but your hands, once warm, start to cool again. The air above the kitchens is different, heavy with lingering heat, but already thinning as it rises. You follow that faint warmth like a trail, winding upward through the service stair until you reach the great hall once more. There the smell of roasted meat and wine stays like a memory, even though the feast is long ended. In the medieval world, food was more than nourishment. It was defense against hunger, yes, but also against the cold. Every meal had purpose, every spice intention. The body was seen as a furnace, and what you fed it decided if the fire within would burn bright or fade to ash. Doctors of the time, followers of Galen's old theory of the four humours, believed balance was the secret to health. Cold and damp were the enemies of life. To counter them, one must eat hot and dry foods, roasted meat, spices, and wine made warm. Bread baked in the fireplace embers was medicine. Mulled wine was not a luxury, It was prescribed records from royal houses describe winter banquets, where every dish was made to heat the blood. Pottage thick with barley spiced with pepper and saffron. Venison roasted over coals basted with wine. Even desserts seasoned with cinnamon and nutmeg. Imported spices were worth their weight in gold, not only for flavor, but for the dream of summer they carried in every bite. And yet it was not only the rich who ate for warmth. In the servants' rooms, simpler meals carried the same idea. Bowls of hot porridge, cabbage, stews and endless bread, soaked in broth, all meant to keep the cold from biting too deep. You picture a tired maid crouching by the fire blowing on her spoon. Eyes half closed in quiet relief. The warmth was not just on her tongue. It spread inward, slow and steady like hope. Curiously, there are records of heating herbs used in everyday cooking. Ginger, mustard seed, garlic and horseradish. These things, though modest, were prized for their power to stir the blood and wake the spirit. Even ale and mead were seen as strengthening best drunk wine. Some medieval brewers made winter ales with honey and spices, believing they helped both courage and digestion. It is tempting to laugh now, but the logic was sound. Without modern insulation, heating, or even good airflow, a full stomach was often the only reliable heat source. After a long day spent in icy halls or guard posts, the first sip of hot soup must have felt like salvation. You take a seat near the great hull, still faintly warm from the night before. The stone keeps the heat like a sleeping animal, giving it off softly. You imagine this same scene centuries ago, the lord and his house gathered for supper. Torches flaring, dogs waiting at their feet, the air humming with the scent of roasted boar and spiced wine. A writer from Burgundy once said, "Fire and feast were the same word in winter. The meaning is poetic and true. To eat was to say yes to life against the coming dark. Each course was an active fight, each swallow a quiet rebellion against the cold." You picture the servants busy behind the scenes, carrying trays, ladling soups, refiling cups. The lords laugh, their breath visible in the torchlight. Somewhere a musician plucks a lute, his fingers red but determined. The sound mixes with the crackle of fire, making a rhythm as old as survival itself. Some historians still puzzle over how much the diet of the rich actually helped them bear the cold. Rich foods, heavy and spiced, gave psychological warmth as much as physical. Yet for peasants and soldiers the reality was far simpler. Keep the pot boiling. There is proof castle guards kept a shared pot simmering day and night, into which scraps of bread, grain and meat were tossed continually. A living still that changed as the week went on. It is easy to dream of such meals, but they were acts of lasting. The broth grew richer, yes, but also stranger. Imagine the layers of flavor of time itself folded into that one pot. A real history of survival. And then there was wine, mulled, spiced, steaming. Its scent alone enough to warm the soul. Recipes from the 1300 seconds describe Hippocras, heat wine with cinnamon, ginger and cloves. Strained through cloth and served hot, doctors swore it could revive even the weakest person. You take an imaginary sip, now and the warmth spreads through your chest, the spice biting gently at the tongue. Not everyone agreed on these cures, though some scholars warned too much heat within could overdry the humors and cause fever. Others claimed cold was a needed teacher, a purifier that built endurance. The debate itself feels eternal, whether comfort weakens or strengthens us. You smile at the thought how little human nature changes even after centuries. The fire beside you snaps, suddenly sending up a spray of spark. You watch them rise and vanish against the dark stone chimney. Around you the echoes of long-ago feasts seem to whisper. The clatter of plates, the laughter of those who, like you, once sought warmth in food and company. Perhaps that is what winter was really about in these walls. Not just staying alive, but staying connected. Each meal, each shared cup, was a reminder that warmth is stronger when shared. As you stand, the warmth from the fireplace clings to you a little longer. Wrapping you in an invisible cloak, you step away back into the hall, where frost still claims the edges of the stones, but the cold feels easier now. Inside you something burns quietly, a borrowed heat from stew, fire and fellowship. And for the first time since this journey began, you understand. In a medieval castle, the best way to fight the cold was not with wood or fur. It was with the small steady flame that lived in every shared meal. Every story told by the fire, every moment of warmth, passed from one heart to another. By late afternoon, castle hums with a quieter rhythm. Fires tended torches lit into the long shadows of the yard stretched into the halls. You follow the faint echo of voices and the scent of steam down a side passage. You have not yet explored the air. Here is warmer and wetter, thick with an unfamiliar sweetness. Then you hear it a splash, followed by laughter muffled by stone. You found the bath-house. Medieval bathing, contrary to popular myth, was not absent. It was a luxury in castles large enough to have their own bath-house. The act of washing was both cleaning and comforting. The room before you glows with flickering lamplight reflected in shallow pools. The air shimmers faintly with heat steam curls against the low ceiling, turning the cold stone into a living cloud. In some noble houses the bath was more ceremony than hygiene. A servant would stoke the fire under a copper pot, filling the wood tub with a mix of warm water, herbs, and sometimes even wine. Writings from the 1300 seconds describe these scented baths as a joy of the flesh and a cure of the soul. You lean closer and catch the faint smell of rosemary and mint, plants known not only for their scent, but for their supposed power to chase away winter's humours. Old lists tell us even smaller castles kept bathing tubs, usually round-bound with iron hoops and lined with linen for comfort. Nobles often shared them with family or friends. Privacy was less a virtue than companionship. Picture Lord sinking into a steaming tub while servants pour heated water over his shoulders. The flicker of candles glows on the water's surface, and for one blissful hour the world outside, the snow, the wind, the stone, stops existing. Oddly, in parts of France and Bohemia, castles had rooms with hollow floor, warmed from below by channels carrying hot air from near by kitchens or furnaces. A simple but good form of radiant heat, this technology echoed ancient Roman systems, surviving in spots where the memory of empire stayed. Some scholars believe these sweating rooms were the medieval link between Roman baths and modern saunas, whether copied on purpose or found again by chance. The warmth here feels deeply human, heat meant to heat. You step closer to one of the wood tubs, its rim damp, the water inside still faintly steaming. Someone left a pile of towels beside it along with a jar of oil with herbs. When you dip your fingers into the water, it is perfectly warm. Not hot, not cold, but the exact warmth of the body itself. For a moment you see why bath houses became sanctuaries. Yet not everyone shared this comfort. Many castles lacked the means or will to heat such spaces. Water was carried hard from wells or rivers, and in winter that job was an act of bravery. You can almost hear the grumbling of servants lugging buckets through frozen yards, their breaths sharp in the air, hands raw from rope and frost. Still they did it because even one warm bath a month was a treasure. A myth-story from the court of Edward II describes how the king's barber was also in charge of preparing the royal baths. His jobs included warming the room, laying cloths around the tub, and perfuming the water with sweet herbs. The mix of bathing and scent was thought to help both body and spirit in an age before medicines we know it. Warmth itself was a treatment. You listen to the soft drip of condensation falling from the ceiling into the water. The sound is hypnotic. You can almost picture the hush of voices, the gentle splash of water against the tub's edge, the way steam blurs faces until all look equal. Here perhaps rank dissolved as easy as dirt. A few religious writers this luxury, calling frequent bathing a temptation of the flesh. But even monks, for all their vows of simple life, made exceptions in winter. Abbey records show bath days once every 2 weeks, sometimes more, especially for the old. The line between faith and practicality grew very thin when the temperature fell below freezing. The warmth of the bath was short but deep. It loosened muscles, thawed stiff fingers, and gave people a glimpse of paradise in a season that often felt like punishment. Imagine stepping out of the water skin, flush trapped in linen, unwarmed by the fire. The shock of cold air outside would sting, yes, but it would also remind you you are alive. Some experts argue communal bathing was as much social ritual as hygiene, a rare space where talk flowed free and laughter echoed without fear of listeners. In this steam-filled haven, courtiers might trade gossip, lovers might whisper, and weary travelers might simply sigh. Warmth did not only clean the skin, it softened the lines between people. You sit now beside the edge of the largest pool, trailing your hand through the cooling water. Tiny ripples chase your reflection. The warmth still clings faintly to your skin. Though you have not bathed, you feel the air's softness, how it wraps around you like an embrace. The castle beyond these walls may be stone and frost, but here for a little while humanity wings. There is a certain poetry to this, the idea that in the heart of winter, people made islands of comfort, spaces where warmth could be borrowed from flame, water, and one another. Perhaps that is the secret of survival. They knew better than we do. Warmth is not something you have. It is something you make moment by moment. You rise feeling the steam brush against your face one last time. Before you step back into the hall, the air outside feels sharper, now more real. But something inside you has changed. You have seen that even in the bleakest age, people found ways to bring softness to the world, to boil water, to light candles, to turn need into ritual. And as the heavy door swings closed behind you, sealing in the last curl of warmth and scent, you think to yourself, maybe this was the castle's greatest defense of all. Not its walls or its towers, but its ability to care for life, even in the heart of the coldest winter. When you return to the main hall later that evening, the fire is already burning high, filling the room with a low gold haze. The smell of wood smoke sticks to everything: your cloak, the benches, even the rushes scattered on the floor. You sit close to the fireplace, thankful for the familiar crackle and the wave of heat against your legs. The flames twist and you're eating oak logs carefully dried all summer long. But even as you warm your hands, your eyes go to the woven wall hangings nearby. The thick drapes that hang from every wall, their faded threads hiding something deeper than art. Those hangings are more than pictures. They are armor made of wool, linen, or sometimes silk. They insulate the stone walls, holding in precious warmth. When the fire burns low, they trap the heat like quiet guards, softening the hard echo of the room and swallowing the chill that seeps from the walls. You touch the fabric and feel its thick weave under your fingers, heavy and slightly rough. Its scent, faintly musky, carries the memory of sheep and lanolin. In medieval times, wool was the unsung hero of survival. It dressed bodies, lined walls, stuffed mattresses, and covered beds. Writers often praised its faithful service, for wool did not just clothe people, it protected them. Unlike linen, which chilled when wet, wool absorbed damp from the air and kept insulating. It was a living fabric, breathing, adjusting, almost loyal. Records from English manors list whole rooms full of spinning wheels and looms in winter. The rhythmic creak of the spindle, the soft twist of thread being made. These were the sounds of life going on through the frost. The women who worked, they wove not only cloth but safety. Each thread meant another barrier between the human body and the cold outside the door. Curiously, some fabrics were left unwashed after spinning on purpose, keeping the natural oils in the wool. Lanolin, the waxy stuff from sheep, gave the material its special water-repellent quality. Cloaks and hose made from this oily wool smelled faintly of earth and animal, but they shrugged off rain and snow like nothing else. Sailors and shepherds knew its value best. But even in castles, the same idea held a bit of smell was a small price for staying warm. Fabric historians point out medieval houses kept whole lists of cloth sorted by season. Light linen for summer, heavy wool for winter. These stores were guarded as tightly as weapons. Fine Flemish wool was traded across Europe, prized by nobles for its softness. Yet even the rough homespun kind was vital. Without it, every breath of winter would have been sharper. Every step across the cold floors more brutal. You pull your cloaked iron, watch how the firelight flickers across the wall hangings. Each one tells a story, hunts, saint, mythical beast. But behind the art lies practical genius. They are hung slightly away from the wall, leaving a thin air pocket that acts as insulation in rooms where no fire burns. Those woven walls can mean the difference between sleep and shaking. Some scholars disagree if this method was widely understood or just found through need. Was it science or instinct? It is hard to say. But as you sit in the quiet warmth of this hall, it is easy to imagine someone centuries ago draping heavy cloths over bare stone and feeling the air grow just a little less cruel. A lesser-known detail from French court records mentions wall hangings were sometimes lined with fur in the coldest seasons, a luxurious double barrier that turned rooms into velvet caves. The weight of those drapes must have been great, but so too was their comfort. You reach out again, tracing one corner where the pattern has faded to threads. The wall feels alive, still slightly springy despite its age. The dyes once bright have softened to gentle autumn colors, ochre, russet, deep blue. The warmth that comes from them is not heat exactly, but presence. These fabrics soaked up centuries of laughter, music, whispered secrets they remember. In the corner of the hall, a weaver's loom sits still now, its oak frame gleaming faintly in the firelight. You picture her, perhaps the lady of the house herself, working there by day, fingers deft and sure, the shuttle sliding back and forth. Each move a thought against the cold, every inch of cloth a promise that winter would not win. The sound of the fire deepens as another log falls into embers. You lean closer, feeling the dry warmth stroke your face. Around you the room has changed. What once felt huge now feels cocooned. The tapestry-covered walls no longer echo your breath. The air itself seems thicker, gentler. A curious superstition once surrounded all people believed sheep's warmth stayed in the cloth long after shearing to where it was to carry it race of the animal's life. Its pulse, its entrance, that idea, half practical, half magical, shows something about how people saw warmth. It was not just physics, it was spirit. Even monks sworn to poverty wrapped themselves in rough wool habits. That prick lead against the skin, the discomfort was part of the devotion. But the fabric's strength was clear. It held up through work, through prayer, through the endless damp of cloisters. You stand and brush your hands against your cloak again. The lanolin shine glints faintly in the firelight, and for a brief moment the scent of earth and wool feels grounding. Perhaps warmth was never only about temperature. Perhaps it was about connection between people, animals, and the materials that kept them alive. Every sheep in the hills, every spinner at her wheel, every loom creaking in some cold tower, they were all part of the same quiet plan against the cold. As you turn toward the hall once more, the wall hanging shifts slightly in the draft, its fibers catching the lights of fire. You realize even when the flames die and the hall grows dark, these woven walls will keep whispering warmth to whoever listens close enough. You follow the flickering lamplight down a narrow hall lined with carved stone. The air grows colder again, and the faint echo of footsteps follows you from behind, as though the castle itself is breathing softly at the end of the hall. A small archway opens into a space unlike the grand halls or smoky kitchens you have seen before. The smell of incense drifts faintly through the air. Sweetened resinous and candle light trembles along the arched ceiling. You have stepped into the chapel. Here the cold feels different. Reverent almost on purpose, the stone floor under your feet is chilled but smooth. Worn by centuries of prayer, the air hums faintly with the echoes of songs long gone. The warmth of the fire is gone, but in its place there is another kind of heat. Spiritual, steady, invisible. Religious life in a medieval castle was constant. Even in the heart of winter chapels, though rarely large, stood at the center of noble houses, and daily prayers were said no matter the temperature. Some days the breath of the people would hang in the air like fog, on others frost crept along the seats before sunrise. Yet still the candles whirl. It old records from Westminster and Canterbury describe winter services so cold that priests wrapped themselves in extra robe, and altar boys took turns holding small braziers near their feet under their clothes. One writer even said, perhaps with a touch of humor, that faith burns brighter than coal in January. Curiously, the wax itself gave warmth of a kind. Candles were not only symbols of divine light, but also small sources of real, Heat in poorly insulated chapels hundreds might be lit at once. During feasts or vigils their combined flames raising the temperature by a few degrees, just enough to thaw fingers and lift spirits. The smell of burning tallow and beeswax, mixed with incense, creating a scent that was at once sacred and strangely homey. You sit quietly on a wood bench, near the front, your hands folded in your lap. The candle nearest you gutters, its wax running in slow pale rivers. The flame flickers, as if nodding with the rhythm of your breath. Around you the shadows shift and shimmer, the light makes the cold almost beautiful. In these holy rooms warmth was often symbolic rather than physical. The fire of faith replaced the fireplace glow. The prayers themselves were seen as a kind of heat for the soul. Monks and priests wrote about the warmth of devotion as something literal felt in the chest during pure prayer. Some even believed strong faith could guard against sickness, the cold humours of the spirit as well as the body. Still, practicality found its way into devotion. Many chapels had small wall spaces where charcoal braziers were kept burning during long services. These holy fires were tended carefully, their coals glowing under iron grates. You can picture the quiet relief of those who stood near them, pretending to warm their hands under the look of piety. A rather forgotten detail from the 1200 seconds notes that richer lords often gave firewood to local churches in winter for the comfort of the holy and the poor. It was not mere charity, it was knowing the castle's own fireplace shared its bounty with the chapel's flame. Heat was an offering as vital as bread or prayer. Some historians debate if the chill of these chapels was on purpose, an architectural reminder of humility, or just inevitable after all. Thick stone and high ceilings made warmth impossible to keep, but even in that lack there was meaning. The cold sharpened awareness. It reminded worshippers that comfort was short in the soul eternal. You glance toward the altar, where a single candle stands taller than the rest. Its flame sways steady but restless. The gold leaf on the cross behind it glints faintly. Its light soft and forgiving. The walls around you are painted with saints and angels. Their colors faded, but their faces calm. Perhaps they too felt the cold once, when the paint was still wet and the mason's breath froze mid-word. The floor under the altar is warm to the touch, a trick of the builders perhaps. In some castles, chapels were built above kitchens or storerooms, letting heat rise naturally through the stones. Others placed furnaces under crypts, making sure the house of God never grew fully lifeless in winter. Cleverer chance, it hardly matters now. The effect stays warmth in unexpected places. You close your eyes and listen. The soft pop of candle wick, the faint rustle of fabric somewhere far off. The bell rings the hour. Time feels slower here, measured not by sunlight but by flame. And you think about the people who once gathered in the same cold room. Soldiers praying before battle, widows whispering for mercy, children holding their parents' hands as they watched the candles tremble. For them, this warmth, however faint, was proof of grace. You reach out and cup your hand near one of the small candles. The flame bends toward you, and for a fleeting instant, you feel its fragile heat. It is not enough to chase the chill from your fingers, but it is something more powerful, an echo of countless others who sought comfort here century after century. As you rise to leave, the sound of your boots on the stone floor feels very loud in the hush. You turn once more toward the altar, the glow of the candles painting your shadow on the wall. In this sacred cold you sense the same truth the monks once wrote about. Warmth is never only in the fire, sometimes it burns quietly within the heart. And as the heavy door swings open, letting in a gust of winter air, you carry that faint heat with you, fragile, flickering, but alive. You step back into the hall, the air colder now, after leaving the chapel's soft candle light. The quiet of respect fades into the murmurs of everyday life. A clatter of buckets, a faint bark echoing from below. You follow the sound, descending a winding stair that smells faintly of hay and damp fur. The torchlight flickers against the rough stone, and a low warmth meets you halfway down. It is different from fire's heats, often earthier, alive. The stables and lower halls of the castle are where life breathes most vividly. Horses stamp their feet, dogs sleep near straw beds. and sometimes even hops rest tied in their stands, feathers ruffling in the drafts. The smell is strong, a mixing of animals, hay, smoke, and humanity. But after days in the upper towers, it feels like home. Here warmth comes not from fire, but from bodies. Records from 1200 seconds houses often say, in the worst months people slept where the animals did. Servants, guards, even travelers found comfort beside the stable walls. The animals' heat trapped by low ceilings and straw bedding turned these spaces into natural furnaces. Horses alone can give off enough warmth to raise a stable's temperature by several degrees. It was not elegant, but it worked. You walk between the stalls, each filled with the quiet rhythm of breathing. Steam rises from the animals' backs in slow curls. Their eyes gleam in the torch light, calm, steady, ancient. Eye dog stirs as you passed, ale thumping softly against the floor. Its body curled tight radiates warmth like a living ember. There is a special comfort in this shared survival, this mixing of human and beast. Medieval life did not separate species the way we do now. Cats slept near looms to keep mice away. Hounds lay across rush-covered floors, their heat welcomed company. Even falcons sat near their masters' chairs, cloaked against the draughts. The castle, for all its grandeur, was never silent. It breathed undrustled with living warmth. A writer from Normandy once said a knight's best winter friend was not his sword but his dog. You can see why a loyal dog could warm both heart and hands, its body pressed close during sleepless nights. In paintings of the era, small lapdogs often appear curled at the feet of noble women. More than mere pets, they were living heaters with names, ribbons, and beds of their own. Curiously, some castles even kept farm animals inside during sieges or extreme winters. Sheep, goats, and chickens would be herded into lower rooms to keep them from freezing. Their presence filled the air with noise and smell, but also with heat. 1300 seconds steward's record describes a night so cold the sheep were brought in, and warmth was found. For all that sentence, simple, practical, captures something deeply human. The refusal to let the world freeze them apart. You stop beside a mare, her breath clouding the air like fog. She leans her head toward you, nostrils flaring softly. You lay a hand against her and echo the warmth. There is startling, dense, immediate, almost sacred. She smells of hay and earth, of life that has never left the soil. You stand there for a while, feeling her heartbeat through your palm, and for the first time in hours your fingers no longer ache. Some historians wonder if medieval builders understood the heating power of animals. When designing castles, the nearness of kitchens, storerooms, and stables below living quarters may not have been chance. Warm air rising naturally would seep through the floors above, creating soft pockets of heat. Others argue it was just convenience. Food and horses needed to be clothed, but the result was the same. The castle's warmth came from the creatures that kept it going. You turn toward a side door that opens into a small room, one of the groom's quarters. It is a simple space, a straw mattress on the floor, a cloak on a peg, a small brazier glowing in the corner. The air is thick and smoky, but far from cold. A boy sleeps there, curled beside a dog whose tail flicks lazily in its dreams. The two of them breathe in rhythm, their shared warmth spreading like a quiet miracle. Through the tiny room, you crouch beside the brazier, watching the coals glow faint red. It is strange, is it not? The higher you go in the castle, the colder the air gets. The lower you go, the more life you find it, as if heat itself prefers humility. There is an old saying from the medieval north, where beasts breathe, frost flees. It is not poetry, it is instruction. Farmers and guards knew survival depended on closeness, on the unspoken bond between humans and the creatures they cared for. Warmth was not solitary, it was shared through first raw and trust. The torch crackles above you, the mare shifts in haste, all hooves scraping softly. Somewhere a rooster stirs, too soon fooled by the firelight into thinking dawn has come. You smile at the sound, the sheer normalcy of it. The castle's grandeur may fade, its walls may crumble, but this warmth born from breath and heartbeat lasts. When you stand again, you brush bits of straw from your cloak and look toward the narrow window slit. Outside, the snow falls silently, thickened and hurried. Inside, the air vibrates with quiet life. You think of how these animals, these living furnaces, were not just companions, but part of the building of survival. The castle was not just stone and wood. It was a living system, every creature giving its share of warmth. You stroked the mare's muzzle once more before turning toward the stairs. Her skin shivers faintly under your fingers, a ripple of muscle and breath. You whisper a wordless goodbye and begin the climb back to the upper floors. The air cools again as you go up, but something inside you stays warm. You carry with you the memory of that living heat, the reminder that in the heart of the coldest season, it was not always the fires or fabrics that saved people. Sometimes it was simply the nearness of another breathing soul. The warmth of the stables stays faintly in your clothes as you climb back toward the upper rooms. Each step echoing in the stairs' hollow throat, the air grows thinner, cooler, drier. It carries a hint of old smoke, and somewhere a draft sighs through a crack in the stone. You reach your ending and pause, pressing your palm against the wall. It feels solid, eternal, and yet it breathes, pulling heat from your skin. You find yourself wondering how the builders lived with what they made. These walls were monuments to strength, but they were also guides of cold. And yet within this design of fortitude, there was hidden cleverness. Soft choices that eased the edge of winter's cruelty. Castle building changed slowly. Each stone laid with lessons from frostbitten fingers in early keeps fire was the only answer to the cold. By the 1200 seconds, design itself began to help. Builders began to see that warmth could be shaped, contained, guided, encouraged to stay like a guest, rather than flee like a runaway. Look around and you will see it. Fireplaces built deep into walls, angled so the heat would spread more evenly. Chimneys placed along inner walls rather than outer ones, so they shared warmth between rooms. Stairs wound tight to trap rising air, while thick wood doors sealed off holes like giant thermal plugs. The castle, for all its aging grandeur, was quietly learning to breathe with purpose. Digs at Dover and Bodiam show even the placement of rooms followed a logic of warmth. Kitchens sat under great halls, laundry rooms near bakehouses, and bedrooms above both. The heat from daily work, cooking, baking, brewing, rose through the stone, seeping upward to where it was most needed, whether by accident or plan. Building became its own heating system. Some modern experts believe this was no coincidence. They point out narrow passages and hidden flues carved within certain walls, channels meant to funnel heat from one fireplace to another. Others argue it was practical improvisation, solutions found in the daily grind of winter, but the result feels almost modern, a primitive, beautiful logic of warmth. You walk down a smaller hall now, its ceiling low and arch. The torchlight trembles along the plaster, showing faint traces of color, old paint, red and ochre. The walls here are lined with wood panels, polished smooth. They creak softly under your fingertips. Warmer than the stone beyond this too was on-purposed ember. Even a thin layer softened winter's touch. It is easy to picture the carpenters at work, chiseling, sanding, fitting planks to curve with the walls. The scent of fresh cut wood mixing with smoke, the rhythm of mallets echoing through unfinished halls. They were not just decorating, they were insulating. The castle, under its armor of stone, wore a second skin of oak and ash, a curious relic found in a Scottish stronghold suggests. Some builders even tried double floors with platforms raised slightly above the stone to trap air beneath. The result was subtle but noticeable, a cushion of still air that stopped the chill from climbing through one's boots. It may not have been luxury, but it was cleverness born of need. You step into a narrow room tucked behind the main hall, a place once for guards or servants. The air is warmer here, surprisingly so. The reason is simple. It's directly behind the great fireplace, sharing its back wall. The heat seeps through the stone, radiating into this quiet space. You rest your hand on the wall and feel its soft warmth, steady as a heartbeat. There is something deeply human about this change. To carve out warmth where none was meant to be, to turn the leftovers of comfort into new shelters. Perhaps this small room was where a steward dozed or a page polished armor while thawing his hands. The glow of warmth from the fireplace beyond would have been faint but precious. Not everyone agrees how on purpose this reuse of heat was. Some archaeologists call it accidental efficiency, others see it as the earliest form of central heating in northern Europe. Regardless, the effect stays. These walls were not as indifferent as they seemed. Within their silence was design, an architecture of care. However rough the spiral stairs carried warmth in curious ways, because they twisted tightly around the inner core of the castle. They trapped air, forcing heat to rise slowly rather than vanish through open holes. In some keeps the steps themselves were wood rather than stone, a small mercy for bare or thinly showed feet. The smell of resin and oak would linger long after the fires below had died. You can almost imagine the castle's designer standing here centuries ago, hand on the same walls, squinting into the dark, thinking not just of defense, but of comfort. Perhaps he was a man who had known too many winters. Perhaps he had lost friends to frost and hunger, and his stones were his answer. A fortress, not only against war but against cold. As you move deeper into the room, the faint sound of wind beyond the walls fades. The warmth here is quiet, not the roaring heat of the kitchens or fireplaces, but the kind that seeps into bones unnoticed. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. A rare stillness born not of flame, but of structure. There is an unspoken truth in this castle's design. Warmth does not always need fire. Sometimes it is born of patience, of learning how it moves, how stone holds memory, how small change in design can soften a harsh world. A book from the late 1300s mentions a mason who claimed his walls could breathe warmth like lungs. Scholars debate if this was poetry or pride, but standing here you almost believe him. The air feels alive, pulsing gently, proof that even the coldest fortress could be coaxed into kindness. When you finally step back into the hole, the temperature drops sharply again. The contrast is immediate, but it leaves you smiling. The castle may be a maze of frost and flame, but it remembers warmth in its bones, and how so do you. You turn toward the stair, the torch sputtering in your hand, and realize how remarkable it is that people without machines or science as we know it taught stone to hold heat and air to linger. In a world ruled by winter, building itself became an act of compassion. Morning again, pale light creeps across the yard, turning the snow to silver and the castle to bone. You rise slowly, wrapping your cloak close, the chill pressing against you like a weight. Even after all this time inside these walls, the cold never truly leaves, it only waits. Still, people here know how to meet it, to shape their days around its mood. The rhythm of winter life in a medieval castle was unlike any other season. Everything slowed, thickened, grew deliberate. You move through the hall now and sense it in every sound. The muffled scrape of a broom on rushes, the soft clatter of wood cups, the sigh of wind sneaking under the doors. Outside, the world sleeps. Inside, people work carefully, saving both energy and warmth. Winter routine began before dawn. Servants rose early to relight the fireplace, sometimes hacking at frozen logs to coax flame from unwilling wood. The first smoke of the day carried through the halls like a prayer. In the kitchens, bread baked while frost still clung to the window panes. Guards stamped their feet at the gatehouse, blowing on their hands, muttering oaths that melted like steam. Written accounts from noble houses describe the day's structure as a balance of need and survival. Chores were arranged by warmth. Baking, brewing, mending, weaving, all close to the fire. Stonework and carpentry paused until spring. Letters were written only in the warmest part of the day, when ink would flow free again. Even study and reading were rationed by temperature. Cold, stiffened fingers dulled the mind and froze imagination with thought. Curiously, some castles changed their whole schedule around the fire. The great hall would be heated for shared tasks in the morning, left to smolder, while the house rested after the noon meal and lit again at dusk for the evening gathering. It was not laziness, it was strategy. Firewood was precious and every flame had to be justified. You walk toward the fireplace now, where a few servants are spreading fresh rushes over the floor. The sound is dry and soothing, the whisper of straw on stone. The rushes, once green and fragrant, serve both comfort and cleanliness. They insulate the floor, absorb damp and soften footsteps. Over them, herbs like lavender, thyme and meadows, water sprinkled, filling the air with faint sweetness. Even amid the smoke and draught, the hall smells almost alive. A lesser-known record from a Yorkshire estate says rushes were changed weekly in winter, but only monthly in summer. The reasoning was simple: in winter, wet boots spilled ale, and the drip of melting snow turned the floors into swamps. Fresh rushes were not luxury. They were cleanliness, and every change brought a short burst of warmth. The scent of dried grass mixing with fire and wool. Life in these months revolved around firelight and candlelight. When dusk fell early and dawn came late, darkness ruled most of the day. You can almost hear the scraping of flint as torches are lit, the first hiss of tallow catching flame. Candles, costly and hard to make, were rationed. Families gathered near the fireplace to share both light and body heat. The glow bound them together in a way sunlight never could. Some scholars suggest this winter closeness, the forced gathering by firelight, fostered a stronger sense of community than summer's freedoms ever could. The castle became not just a fortress, but a living being, every person a vital spark, keeping the whole from freezing as night falls. Once more use it quietly near the fireplace. The flames have softened to embers glowing deep red like the heart of the world. The rushes crackle softly under your boots. Outside, snow falls again, erasing footprints and sound alike. Inside, warmth gathers in pools of light, and you can almost feel the day folding itself shut. It strikes you that life here was a constant talk with the cold, never victory, only endurance. Each task, each breath, each flicker of fire was an act of balance. People who lived within these walls did not defeat winter. They learned its rhythm, lived inside its heartbeat, and called it home. Night settles deep over the castle, pressing close to the walls like a second skin. Outside, snow drifts softly against the gatehouse. Inside, the last of the day's warmth flickers in the fireplace. You draw closer to the fire, and with you come others. Guards finishing their watch, servants done with their chores, a kitchen maid still dusted with flour. The hall fills slowly with quiet laughter, the scent of wood smoke, and the comforting murmur of conversation. It is in these hours, when the frost thickens and the world goes still, that people remember how to be human. The games begin. Leisure in a medieval castle was not grand or loud. It was small, bright and alive, a spark of joy. In the long dark months around the fire, people played dice or knuckle bones, their laughter rising with each roll. The carved cubes click against the table like little bursts of luck. Someone teases another for cheating, another swears by St. George that fortune hates him. The sound is warm enough to make even the coldest room feel almost kind. Cards as you know them came later, but board games were already loved. Backgammon, chess and the game of tables filled countless winter nights. In one corner of the hall, two men hunch over a wood board carved with tiny squares. A candle between them drips wax onto the surface, its flame trembling each time one exhales. I move a counter, a pause, the fire crackles, the game goes on. Some scholars trace these games to the east, carried by traders and soldiers. Others argue they grew naturally from the human need to make order from uncertainty, to give the cold nights rules and outcomes, a kind of structure against chaos. Whatever their start, they became the rhythm of winter evening, strategy, laughter, rivalry, and the comfort of shared time. Near the fire, a group of women sew by lamplight, their needles glinting like frost. They talk quietly, their voices weaving together with the music of the hall. From somewhere deeper in the room comes a soft melody, a lute perhaps, or a flute carved from you. The notes drift upward, tender and shy at first, then fuller as confidence grows. Music too was warm. There is a rather charming account from the 1300 seconds describing how a castle house entertained itself on winter nights. The ladies and the knights took turns telling merry tales, and laughter rolled like thunder in the beams above. You can almost hear it, the sound of stories, half true, half dreamt, filling the space where cold once ruled. Curiously, one common form of fun was the riddle. People loved to challenge one another's wit, to spark thought and laughter in equal measure. What runs but never tires? What burns but gives no light? The answers water and the heart remind you that humor and thought often shared the same fire. Not everyone joined in near the back. A soldier mends his gear by the dim light of a candle, the sound of thread pulling through leather, Steady as breath, a cook naps on a bench apron still tied her head, tilted toward the warmth. Even silence here feels friendly, the fire's glow. It's everyone together, strangers and family alike. Under the same orange halo, some historians believe the nightly gathering by the fireplace was the start of countless folk tales, the ones that would later travel far beyond castle walls. When you listen closely to the hum of voices, you can almost hear the seeds of those old legends. Dragons sleeping under mountain, spirits wandering the snow, lovers separated by storm. Stories grew out of need, not imagination alone. They were fuel, keeping minds warm when bodies trembled. One writer from the early Renaissance called storytelling the fire that needs no wood. It is a perfect image, warmth born not from flame but from words, carried from mouth to mouth, century to century. You lean back now, feeling the rough wood of the bench under your shoulders. The whole smells of smoke, woolen, roasted grain. A jug of ale passes from hand to hand. Each sip a small rebellion against the cold. Someone begins to sing a low, lilting tune about summer fields and swallows returning. The melody is simple, but it stirs something deep inside you. As the fire lights ways, shadows dance across the walls, the loom, the dogs, the faces, half lit and half hidden. You realize in these hours the castle transforms, the hard lines of stone soften. Laughter fills spaces once ruled by silence. Winter does not vanish, but it forgets its cruelty for a little while. Oddly, the games and songs were not just entertainment, they served purpose. Monks and writers alike said mirth lightened the humors and warmed the blood. Medieval medicine linked joy with heat's adness, with cold. To laugh then was not sin, it was survival. Even the church, in its sternest days, made peace with that truth. Outside, the wind howls faintly through the arrows, lit the storm presses close. But the fire roars louder. They stumble again, someone claps in triumph. A dog sighs and shifts closer to the flames, paws twitching in its dream. The night stretches long, but it does not feel empty. Users among them, these ghosts of laughter and game and summoned, you feel the same pulse they did. The defiant warmth that rises not just from fire, but from people gathered near it. And as you close your eyes, letting the music and murmurs blend into once oft rhythm, you realize something simple and timeless. Warmth is not only what shields you from the cold, sometimes it is what you create in spite of it. The fire in the great hall has burned low by the time you step outside. The heavy door groans behind you, and for a moment the sound of warmth, the laughter, the crackle, the hum of voices fades into silence. What greets you now is the pure crystal stillness of a castle wrapped in snow. The yard lies under a smooth white blanket and broken, but for a few scattered prints, fox, raven, man. The air bites with such sharpness that it almost hums. You pull your cloak tight, but still the cold finds its way under, threading through fabric and skin like a slow whisper. Every sound here is exaggerated by the frost. A drop of water falling from an icicle lands with a note so crisp it could be music. Snow softens everything. Even the roughest stones of the walls seem gently smoothed by the frozen hush. You walk slowly, the world reduced to shades of blue and silver. The torches lining the walls flicker, their flames small and unsure in the open air. Castles in winter work, reaches of two worlds inside the flicker of humanity. Outside of vast indifferent beauty, you can see why writers often describe them as sleeping beasts. The towers rise above you like dark cribs, the walls glistening with frost. Breath billows from your mouth, the phantom wind that follows you with every step. Old letters from soldiers and stewards tell of such mornings, the silence after snowfall, the way the very air seemed to hold its breath. One wrote, the snow makes no sound, yet it speaks of the world's stillness. You understand what he meant. Even now it feels as though time itself has stopped to listen, and yet this silence is deceptive. Under it lies work, duty, entrance. A stable hand leads a horse carefully across the icy stone. The animal's breath steaming like a forger guard stamps his feet near the gatehouse fire. Blowing into his gloves, a kitchen boy hurries past with a basket of wood. His cheeks red, his nose running, the cold unites them all in quiet choreography. Curiously, there is proof some castles planned their defenses around the sound of snow. A blanket of frost could muffle footsteps, but also dull sound from approaching enemies. Guards learned to listen differently to the crunch of snow underfoot, to the shift of wind that carried voices further in cold air. Winter changed everything, even war. You look up, the sky is heavy and low, the color of pewter. Snowflakes begin to fall again. Slow, deliberate, one by one, as if the world has decided it is not quite done burying itself. They land on your hood, melting instantly into tiny spots of dampness. The smell of iron fills the air, the scent of cold itself, clean and old. There is a beauty here that feels almost sacred. The yard, the frozen moat. The towers trimmed with ice, they seem eternal, as though the castle was built not by men but by winter itself. You can almost hear it breathe, the creak of wood, the soft drip of melting frost, the whisper of wind through the arrow slits. A lesser-known account from a northern abbey describes monks walking through snow-covered cloisters at dawn, each footstep making a sound like paper folding. They wrote that the silence of snow was a prayer too large for words. You think of that now, as you stand still watching your breath drift upward and vanish. Not everyone found this beauty comforting. To some, the endless wait was a reminder of isolation. Whole castles could be snowed in for weeks, their gates stuck shut, letters went undelivered. Travelers stuck, markets closed, a sense of stillness turned to suffocation. There are journals filled with laments about the prison of frost. But for others, winter's silence offered thought. Lords took counsel in their rooms. Poets wrote by firelight, artisans mended tools, soldiers repaired armor. Life slowed, yes, but it did not stop. The snow became both blanket and boundary, a time to look inward. You pause near the well in the yard, its rim is slick with ice, its rope stiff as iron. Under the surface the water lies dark and still, like a mirror waiting for spring. Your reflection shivers, there a blur of breath and motion. The silence presses in, intimate and vast all at once. Some experts suggest the human link to snow in medieval times was deeply spiritual. It was purity and punishment, death and renewal. It reminded people they were small, temporary, fleeting against a world that would always outlast them. Yet it also whispered of endurance, because snow, for all its quiet cruelty, always melts. You walk toward the outer wall, your boots sinking into the soft powder. The sky brightens briefly as the clouds shift, showing a pale sun, more hint than light. The flakes shimmer as they fall, catching that frail glow. You reach the parapet and rest your hands on the cold stone, looking out across the white horizon. The world feels endless down below. The frozen moat glints like glass. Somewhere far off you can hear the faintest sound, a single croak awling, its voice cracking through the air like a memory. Otherwise nothing moves. The stillness is complete, and then in that silence you hear something softer still, the faint thrum of life within the castle walls, the fires burning, the horses breathing, the whisper of someone stoking coals in the kitchen, warmth hidden but present, beating under the snow's perfect calm. You realize this too is part of the story of war, not just flame and fur and stone, but the knowing that life goes on quietly under the cold, patient as roots under frost. The people of these castles knew it well. They did not fight the silence, they learned to live within it. You close your eyes and listen again, letting the cold rest against your face. The snow falls thicker, now muffling even your heartbeat. The world holds its breath once more, and you stand in the middle of it, between heat and ice, between stillness and endurance. Just another traveler learning how the past survived the winter. By the time the sun dips behind the horizon again, the air has turned sharper still, so cold that sound seems to crack in half when it travels. You find yourself standing near the outer wall, where a group of guards huddle beside a brazier. The flames flicker wildly in the wind, throwing brief splashes of light across the armor that gleams like frostbitten silver. You pull your cloak tighter and feel how the air bites at the edges of your breath. This is the cold they feared most, the kind that came during siege or war. When winter and warfare met, survival became art and desperation in equal measure. A castle under siege in January was a cruel puzzle, fortified yet trapped, full of stores yet starving. The same walls that kept enemies out also sealed the cold in. Firewood dwindled, rations frozen, morale became as fragile as ice. Writers described such winters not in days but in degrees of endurance. You can almost picture it now. The fires burning day and night, smoke curling like dark ribbons above the walls. Men wrapped in layers of wool and leather, their faces black with soot. The clang of iron on iron muted by snow, the air filled with the mixed smells of tallow, smoke and fear. One letter from a garrison commander in northern France speaks of this age that froze both friend and foe. He wrote of soldiers on both sides, lighting fires within sight of one another, their plumes of smoke mingling in the wind. Two camps to flames, the same battle against the same enemy, the cold itself. Curiously, during long sieges, it was common for attackers to suffer as much as those within. Winter leveled all ranks and walls. Frost did not pick sides. Soldiers' tents collapsed under snow, and their armor froze against their skin. One account from 1315 tells of men thawing their mail shirts by the fire each morning before putting them on, only to have the metal burn their fingers inside the walls. The castle turned inward. Fires burned smaller, hoarded like treasure. Wood was rationed by the hour, straw stuffed into windows, and every animal became a source of heat, alive or not. Kitchen records from the time mention bones boiled 3 times for broth and burned for fuel. Nothing was wasted, everything fed the flames or the living. Historians still disagree which danger was greater, hunger or frost. In truth, they were the same battle. Cold dulled hunger, but also slowed the blood. It made hands shake and minds wander. It crept into the marrow until even courage froze. You follow the guards' movements, their faces faintly red from the brazier's glow. They speak little words, freeze to quickly out here. One of them feeds a branch into the coals and sparks sleep upward, bright against the dark sky. It is a small defiant gesture, but one that carries centuries of meaning. A flame kept alive no matter the odds. A rare surviving poem from a soldier during a northern siege captures this beautifully. No horn was sounded, the snow made all still, the fire our trumpet, the smoke our banner. We fought not for land, but for the warmth awake again. No one knows who wrote it, but the feeling feels eternal. The castle's defenders found clever ways to endure. They dug hidden flues to draw warm air from the kitchens toward the towers. They used animal hides as simple insulation, hanging them behind doors. Guards rotated shifts, fast, never staying in the wind longer than needed. Even the drawbridge chains were greased with fat to keep them from freezing solid. You step closer to the brazier, feeling the faint sting of heat against your cheeks. The guards glance at you briefly, then return to their watch. One rubs his hands together, the leather of his gloves creaking softly. The fire hisses as snowflakes fall into it, vanishing instantly. It is hard to picture war amid such beauty, the sky overhead scattered with stars, the snow glittering like powdered glass, and yet history says battles were fought in this silence, that arrows once hissed through this same frozen air. There is a strange calm in that thought, how life and death, fire and ice coexisted without contradiction. Some experts suggest winter war shaped the very design of castles, their thicker walls, deeper wells, and vast storage rooms born of lessons learned in frost and famine. Others think it was mere chance, the outcome of practicality rather than pain. But walking these walls now, you sense every stone remembers. Every frostbitten wall carries the echo of a night when someone refused to let the fire die. The brazier flares suddenly as another log catches the light, spills across the snow, painting the men's faces in golden shadow. You can see their breath in the air, mingling like smoke. One hums softly some forgotten tune from home, carried here through miles of cold. The melody barely rises above the wind, yet it fills the space more completely than sound should. You realize, standing among them, that this moment, quiet, weary, stubborn, is the heart of every castle winter, not the feasts or the wall hangings, not even the fireplaces in the great halls, but this men keeping watch beside a dying fire, waiting for dawn that will come late and pale, and still believing light is worth the wait. You lift your gaze to the horizon. The stars shimmer faintly through the icy haze, distant but unblinking. Somewhere far off, the faint howl of a wolf threads through the stillness. The guards do not react, they have heard it. before they simply feed the fire again. And as you watch them, you feel a quiet truth settle in your chest. Warmth in the hardest winters was never just about heat, it was about endurance. The will to stand guard through the longest night, to share the last ember. To believe the world, despite its cruelty, could still be kind come morning. When dawn returns, it is a pale, reluctant thing, less a sunrise than a slow silvering of the sky. The cold has deepened overnight, hardening the ground until it gleams like polished glass. You wake to the faint clang of a bell and the hollow scrape of footsteps in the hall. The castle stirs once more, as it always does each morning, a quiet victory. You step into the hall and find the fire reduced to embers. A servant crouches before it, blowing gently through a bronze pipe to coax it back to life. Thin curls of smoke twist upward, and soon a spark catches, a fragile miracle that grows into warmth. Watching her work, you realize tending the fire was not just a chore, it was a calling. In medieval houses, the role of the fire keeper, often a woman, was sacred. From dawn until nightfall, she kept the fireplace fed, the flames cleared the ash, and watched over the coals like a mother over her child. The health of the fire was the health of the home. If it went out, disaster followed. Dray lighting, it was not simple. Fire had to be borrowed from another fireplace, carried carefully through wind and snow, in a clay pot or an iron pan. Some historians believe this ritual of borrowing fire had spiritual weight. The act meant kinship, one house sharing its life force with another. Even in times of rivalry, neighbors lent fire to one another. The flame, after all, belonged to no one. It was everyone's fragile guard. A record from a Yorkshire manor describes an entire ceremony around this practice. Each year the house put out all flames. On the night before Candlemas, at dawn, a single spark was drawn new from the church's holy fire and carried through the castle, lighting every fireplace again. The belief was simple yet deep. Warmth began again, pure and blessed. You kneel beside the servant, now watching her with steady patience. Her hands are red and cracked from work, but her movements are sure. She adds a handful of kindling, then another, until the coals breathe back to life. The warmth blooms slowly, brushing your face with soft relief. Firekeeping was an art. Too much would wasted fuel, too little smothered flame. The ash had to be raked just so to cradle the embers through the night. Many castle lists name tools for this purpose: uns, bellows, shovels, and iron pokers, with handles shaped like leaves or beasts. These were not luxuries, they were tools of survival. Curiously, digs at several castles show ash pits dug right under fireplaces, connected to small vents that carried air upward. This clever design let fires breathe and burn cleaner. Some scholars argue it shows a surprising grasp of combustion, others think it was just the product of centuries of trial and error. Either way, the effect was the same. Steadier heat, less smoke, and longer life for the fire. There is a quiet dignity in this ritual. The firekeeper does not speak as she works. You hear only the soft clink of metal and the faint hiss of new wood catching flame. The smell of smoke mixes with wall-bread and morning air. The first real warmth of the day spreads across the stones, gentle but certain. In some areas, the fireplace was seen as the heart of the house spirit itself. Old beliefs said a small god or family guard lived in the fire, watching over those who fed it. To spill water into it or let it die unattended was bad luck and insult to the unseen guest. Every spark had a soul, every ember a memory. You can imagine how such beliefs came to be. In a world where warmth meant life, the flame's survival was a measure of care. A glowing fireplace promised more than heat, it promised tomorrow. The servant stands and dusts her apron. Her breath steams faintly as she moves toward another fireplace down the hall, carrying a small ember in a clay pan. You follow her, watching how carefully she walks, shielding it with her hands. The coal glows faintly in the dim light, a single heartbeat of color in the grey morning. There is something almost holy about it. One spark, carefully tended, lighting another fire and another, until the whole castle hums again with life. The warmth is not sudden, it spreads like music, room by room, note by note. In the kitchens, the new day's fires are already taking shape. Pots hang from iron hooks, the smell of broth rising in the great hall. Servants feed the fireplace with oak stacking it with practiced rhythm in the chapel candles, or re-lit their flames swaying gently as if in greeting. Everywhere, the same quiet act repeats warmth reborn. Not everyone agrees. How much meaning medieval people gave these rituals. Some say it was superstition. Others see it as poetry woven into daily labor. But standing here, surrounded by the faint crackle of kindling and the whisper of rising heat, it is hard not to feel something larger is at work. You touch the edge of the hearth side, still warm from the servant's care. It feels smooth and familiar, worn by centuries of hands doing exactly this. You imagine the generations that came before, each dawn the same kneeling, breathing life into embers, whispering perhaps a small prayer under their breath. Outside, the wind moans faintly against the shutters, but inside the flame steadies, the hall brightens, a kettle hums, and just like that the day begins again. In this rhythm of tending and lighting lies the true secret of survival. Not grand acts or roaring fires, but the small persistent act of keeping heat alive. The medieval people knew it by heart, that endurance is not about beating the cold, but about refusing to let the light go out. Use it for a moment longer, watching the fire's heart turn from orange to gold. Then you rise, the warmth following you, as you step into the next hall, carrying with you the simple timeless truth that has burned in every home since the first, that a single spark, if guarded well, is enough to see you through the longest winter. By midday, the castle hums with quiet motion. The sun outside is weak, the color of tarnished silver. But within these walls life goes on through routine and rhythm. The fires have found their stride. The air smells of wood smoke and roasted grain. You follow the faint heat up another narrow stair, one that spirals so tight you brush the walls with each turn. It leads not to grandeur, but to the people who keep the warmth alive, the servants' quarters. These rooms, tucked under the rafters and deep along the inner walls, are the hidden pulse of the castle. Their ceilings are low, their windows small, and yet they hold a kind of closeness. The great halls never know. Your warmth does not come from luxury, it comes from nearness. You duck under a low archway and step into one of the sleeping rooms. The air is warmer than you expect. 7 or 8 straw mattresses line the floor, arranged so close they nearly touch. The faint scent of hay sweatened wool fills the air, mixing with the smoke that seeps in from the fireplace. Below you, run your hand across a rough blanket, heavy, woven from unwashed wool that still smells faintly of the sheep it came from. It is not comfort as you know it, but it is something better, shared heat. Medieval servants understood a truth modern minds often forget, that bodies make warmth best together. Sleeping close, shoulder to shoulder, was not only friendship, it was survival. A servant's room was less a bedroom than a hibernation space. In deep winter, even the plainest castle would host a chorus of snores under low ceilings. Each breath another stitch in the quilt of shared endurance. A piece of a 1300 seconds letter survives. From a steward in Normandy, the boys sleep so tight upon one another that no frost can find them. You smile at the image. There is tenderness in it, a reminder warmth in the end was never alone. Curiously, the walls of these rooms were often plastered or even whitewashed, not just for cleanliness but to trap heat. A smooth surface reflected firelight better, turning even a single candle into a source of brightness. Some quarters were built along the castle's inner ring, where kitchens and bakehouses below sent warmth upward through the stone. The servants, practical and clever, found their own ways to fight the cold. They lined cracks in the walls with cloth, hung spare cloaks over doorways, and used bundles of hay as insulation. In some houses people slept under a shared rug, rather than separate blankets, a communal weight of woven warmth. It was not elegant, but it worked. There is a story recorded by a visiting monk who spent a night among castle servants. During a harsh northern winter, he wrote with equal parts surprise and admiration that their laughter was hotter than the fireplace. He described them joking, singing, and telling stories. Deep into the night, the air thick with smoke and mirth, he decided joy itself was their fire. You crouch near one of the narrow windows. Now frost traces delicate fern-like pattern along the horn, covering through it. You see only grey sky and drifting snow. but inside the space feels cocooned, the faint creak of wood, the whisper of breath, the sound of someone turning in sleep. It all weaves together like music. Some historians argue these shared rooms crude, though they were gave a kind of comfort. The nobility lacked, the lords and ladies slept alone in their cold high rooms, surrounded by silken silence, while those below shared warmth and company. Isolation, after all, is its own kind of chill. You touch the wall near the floor and feel faint heat seeping upward, the kitchen fires working their invisible magic. It is not much, but enough to soften the edges of the cold. You imagine the people who lived here centuries ago, cooks with smoke-streaked faces, maids with flour-dusted hands, stable boys smelling faintly of hay. Their laughter, their quarrels, their snores, all folded together in this warm little pocket of stone. A lesser-known custom mentioned in an old house manual described servants heating bricks or stones near the fire. Before bedtime, they would wrap them in rags and place them at their feet under the blankets. The warmth would last for hours, sometimes until morning. You can almost feel it now, the weight of the heated brick, the slow release of comfort against icy toe. One might call this poverty, but standing here surrounded by the remains of their small world, the worn blankets, the straw, the faint mark of human life, you feel something else entirely. You feel strength. These were people who did not have enough and yet always found enough. Even their laughter, muffled now by centuries, seems to stay. You can picture them in the flickering lamplight, whispering jokes between yawns, sharing bread, wrapping arms around shoulders as the wind howled outside. There is something deeply human about that picture, plain, unrecorded, eternal. You sit down on the straw mattress, the texture rough but giving. The air smells faintly of ash and wool, the twin sense of endurance. You breathe in, and for a moment it feels as if you have joined them, as if the centuries between you and them have dissolved in the shared universal act of seeking warmth. Perhaps this was the secret no history ever caught, that while kings froze in towers of stone, warmth was not a privilege of rank but of closeness. A castle might divide its people by status, but the cold united them all. You lie back for a moment, staring up at the timbered ceiling where shadows move like gentle waves. Somewhere below, a fire crackles. You feel its faint pulse through the floorboards, an echo of comfort traveling upward through stone and time, and as your eyes drift shut, you understand why they could sleep through the longest nights. It was not the thickness of the blankets or the strength of the fire, it was the nearness of others, the quiet rhythm of shared breath, the fragile but certain warmth that lives between bodies and trust. By evening the snow has slowed to a soft dusting, and a thin veil of mist drapes the yard like lace. You climb again, this time toward the highest rooms, the ones belonging to the lord and lady of the castle. The steps grow narrower as you go up, winding through stone that smells faintly of soot and age. When you reach the top, the air is still and cold but clean somehow. Touched by the scent of beeswax and faded lavender, you push open a wood door and step inside. The Lord's Solar, the private room for warmth and privacy, unfolds before you like a secret. The light here is gold soft, coming not from torches but from the glow of a carefully kept fire. Curtains drape thickly around the bed, and the walls are hidden under layers of wall hangings. Garden saints' battles frozen in thread. This room you see is warm thread to art. Every detail is made to hold the fragile luxury of heat. The fireplace is carved deep into the wall. It had sweeping upward in graceful stone arcs to trap the rising smoke. The air feels gentler, here cushioned by fabric and fur. It is not truly warm, not by your modern sense, but it is enough to make you exhale with relief. The solar rests where the beating hearts of noble comfort.